You are listening to the Author Diary Entries podcast. I'm your host, Sagan Morrow, and this is episode number 196. Access the show notes and transcript of this episode at saganmorrow.com/podcast. Over the past couple of months, I have immersed myself fully in working on my next romcom novella, Love by Design. It has been a beautiful experience. This is the easiest book that I have written so far, which has been such a joy and a relief because the last book that I wrote, Kiss Me, which is book 8 in the Polyamorous Passion series, was the hardest book for me to write. So it's been very lovely, extremely beautiful to write the easiest book that I've written so far after having a bit of a challenge with Kiss Me. I'm very happy with how Kiss Me turned out, but it was the most challenging book that I've written to date. And this has just been smooth sailing with Love by Design. I've very much enjoyed that. Now, I want to share a lot more behind the scenes of the experience with writing Love by Design in some upcoming episodes here on the Author Diary Entries podcast. And since it's part of the Small Town Stilettos duology, I do want to get into the really fun ways in which the two books mirror one another. For today, we're going to focus on what the planning process was like for Love by Design. I'm not going to really tell you much about the book itself and the plot and everything like that. We are going to save that for a future episode. Today, I really want to get into the entire planning process for doing the chapter-by-chapter outline. I already knew the general premise of Love by Design before I even finished writing Small Town Stilettos, which was published 3 years ago. And because I wanted Love by Design to mirror Small Town Stilettos, I knew that this book needed to be exactly 11 chapters long, just like Small Town Stilettos. So with that in mind, a few months ago when I created my chapter outline, I basically was looking at it and thinking to myself, okay, here's the overall arc of what I want from the story, here's the general concept. Now, how is it all going to unfold? I had some pretty vague ideas, but not a lot of specifics. And so I wanted to try something new for the planning process of this book. I wanted to try putting together the book outline using a tarot spread. So I created my own book outline spread in which I pulled 11 cards, each representing a different chapter of the book. The concept here was that by doing a tarot spread, I would tease out the ideas of the beats of the story and what happens in each chapter and the vibe of each chapter based on the tarot card that represented each chapter. And it was so lovely to see the ways in which my overall concepts and thoughts for this story were really reflected in the cards that I pulled. So let's go through those tarot cards together. Chapter 1, I pulled the Ace of Swords. This card is all about new beginnings, and it can have a very strong emotional force to it. It's an invitation to step into your own. The Ace of Swords is often associated with almost a bolt of lightning, sort of aha moment of clarity. What I loved about the Ace of Swords showing up for chapter 1 is that the entire first chapter is all about the main character arriving in a new town to start a brand new life, and she also meets her love interest who immediately sweeps her off her feet. The funny thing about this is I had already written chapter 1 years ago. So immediately after I wrote Small Town Stilettos, I wrote the first chapter of Love by Design, as well as various other scenes throughout the novel. Now, when I was reviewing those scenes in that first chapter over the past couple months as I've been working on Love by Design, about half of the scenes that I had already previously written a few years ago, they just didn't make the final cut. I just cut them completely. They were just not a good fit for where I wanted to take the book. And I did do a fair number of rewrites and edits on the stuff that I did keep, but the Ace of Swords is an exquisite representation of chapter 1, and it was just really cool to pull that card for chapter 1 and then look at what I'd already written for chapter 1 and be like, well, that's perfect. It's absolutely beautiful. Chapter 2, I pulled the Queen of Pentacles. This is a card of a very nurturing environment. It is a card associated with abundance and prosperity and a comforting, safe home life. It also has Mother Nature vibes to it. The way in which I translated this card into chapter 2 was by focusing a lot on the main character's new home life. I had someone else take her under his wing. We are invited into the comforts of a budding friendship in the home. There's also a big nature scene in this chapter to really round out that connection to the natural world. For chapter 3, we have the Six of Wands. This card can indicate external validation, optimism and confidence, and sort of a stepping stone towards one's accomplishments. It encourages us to be proud of ourselves and to not downplay our accomplishments or our abilities. How do we see this in the novel, in Love by Design? Our main character learns to believe in herself after a moment of insecurity, and she also stands up for her convictions. She is recognized for her talents by others. She's out and about in the community. We get to see her out in public, pursuing her dream, building her belief in herself, and gaining confidence. Chapter 4, we have the Eight of Swords. This card shows a woman dipping her toe in her emotions, but essentially trying to hide from it. She's also blindfolded, and she feels stuck and powerless. There can sometimes be damsel in distress connotations. Some tarot readers believe that the Eight of Swords shows up when we actually do have the ability within us to set ourselves free, and so we need to just actively make that decision to set ourselves free. But I played more off of those feelings of being stuck and powerless for this chapter. We have a literal damsel in distress moment in which the main character needs to be rescued by the love interest, and it is such a vibe. This was one of my favorite scenes that was inspired by the tarot cards. I had no idea that this scene was going to even occur until I pulled this card, and I started thinking about how it might translate to the page, and then the idea for this scene came up, and I love it. It's one of my favorite scenes. So that was fantastic. Chapter 5, we have the Page of Swords. This was another really fun one to build a scene around because the Page of Swords can include the importance of holding your cards close to your chest. It can indicate overhearing things or spying on people, new information coming to light, looking over one's shoulder to protect oneself, that kind of thing. I wrote this into the story by having the main character overhear a conversation happening about her. It's so good. It was really fun to write this. She overhears some pivotal information, but she doesn't actually know what it is that she's hearing. There might be a little bit of a misunderstanding in it. It's very fun. The other piece that I wrote into this is that she is betrayed by someone else because she overshares some information. And once again, I had no idea that was going to happen in this novel until I pulled this card. So doing a chapter by chapter tarot outline might be my new favorite way to plot a story. This was so lovely to be able to pull out these really great scenes that I adore that made the book so strong as a result from the tarot cards. For chapter 6, I pulled the Ace of Wands. This is another new beginning. It's typically a very passionate card. It often involves creative ventures. Now, I originally thought I might go for more of a sort of sexual energy side of things, but as I wrote this chapter, it unfolded in a different way than I expected. I opted for more of the creative side in terms of the main character's work, but the other side of it is there's a very sweet romantic moment that happens in which the main character and the love interest open up to each other and they show more of themselves to each other, parts of themselves that no one else has ever seen. So that was, I think, a very lovely interpretation of the card, even if it's perhaps a bit unconventional of a choice. For chapter 7, we have the Empress. This card is heavy on emotions, and there's often an abundance of love here. Traditionally, children or some sort of nurturing comes into it as well. In the book Radical Tarot, the author talks about how there can also be an erotic force of creation energy to it. How does this fit into my novel? From the nurturing side of it, there is an interaction with a child. I think that this is only the second time in the 10 books that I've written so far in which a character interacts with a child, which is pretty funny. I typically write a lot of child-free characters. Now, at the end of the chapter, there is a sensual moment between the main character and her love interest. And what I really like about this is that the energy between the characters in that scene at the end of this chapter, it has almost an erotic vibe to it, directly connected back to a creative experience. Now, I wrote that scene into the book weeks before I read Radical Tarot. I had not heard of this erotic force of creation angle of this card of the Empress until I read that book, Radical Tarot. So I'm kind of obsessed that the vibe was already written into the story without me having that understanding of the interpretation of the card in that way. I think that that's so cool. And also, just a little sidebar, this book, Love by Design, is a closed-door romance. When I say that there's an erotic vibe in this scene, I mean that more in the sense of the emotional tension on the page, which is kind of one of my favorite things to write. For Chapter 8, we have Strength. This card is a balanced, inner or gentle form of strength. It's the idea that strength comes in many forms and how coaxing can be much stronger than the brittleness of force. Courage, compassion, and perseverance are often associated with this card. Interestingly, strength is sometimes viewed as a more active version of the Empress, and we see this translate to the page because the main character makes a decision in this chapter to take matters into her own hands. The other aspect that happens in this chapter is that our main character comes up with a brilliant idea. Things are really clicking into place, but she decides to take that coaxing sort of approach to it rather than trying to force something. Originally, when I first pulled this card, I thought that this chapter was going to be about boundaries and going for a hike and spending time with the dog, maybe an interaction with a wild animal. I ended up going in a very different direction, and I like how it unfolded. It's not what I expected from Strength, but it works really well. And I think that just, highlights the beauty of tarot. As another little sidebar here, it really highlights the beauty of tarot in the sense that there are so many layers, there's so much complexity to each card and how we might view it, how we might interpret it from one tarot spread to another. And so this particular interpretation of it was just really lovely and not something that I would have expected to come out of it. Okay, now for Chapter 9, I pulled the 8 of Pentacles. This card is all about diligence, typically putting in the effort to have mastery over one's craft. However, 8 of Pentacles can also be about appreciation for where you are at in the journey, the concept of not cutting corners, not giving up, and it can also be about the desire to shift into the next level. Now, when I first pulled this card, I intended to go with the literal interpretation of the card and focus primarily on the main character's job for this chapter. But then I scrapped that altogether. Instead, this chapter is entirely from the love interest point of view. This is my first dual POV ever in a book. And it's basically an opportunity to see things through his eyes, to understand what he's actually been thinking and feeling this whole time. By the end of the chapter, he's had a change in his outlook on life and sees an entirely new path ahead for his future. So it's, again, a very interesting, different take on the 8 of Pentacles. We are really leaning into the subtleties of the underlying messages of this card rather than focusing so much on the traditional view of this card as being about, working hard type of thing. Chapter 10, we have the Queen of Cups. With this card, we again see a toe in the water. The Queen of Cups is very close to the emotions surrounding her, but she is not surrendering to her emotions. She is very compassionate, she's very loving, very caring, but one of the most important aspects of the Queen of Cups is that she has a lid on her emotions. She is in control of herself. She is feeling things without letting the emotions wash over her and just have complete control. The way that this translates to the page in Love by Design, in my novella, is that the main character is so close to giving into temptation, but she has mastery over herself, over her emotions. She recognizes where she needs to not give into her feelings for some pretty important reasons. She still feels very strongly. She's full of love. She gives voice. She puts words to her feelings. She acknowledges and accepts how she feels, but she does not let those emotions rule her. And then we have chapter 11, the last chapter of this novella, and the card that I pulled here was the Three of Pentacles. Again, we have the theme of work in this card. Pentacles are typically associated with, career, material goods, working, things like that. But in this case, for the Three of Pentacles, the worker is already a master at their craft. They're being recognized by others around them. It's often a card of teamwork and skilled labor. It's potentially about a new perspective. It's often about support from one another. And it can also be about having a very strong foundation. In this chapter of my novella, we see the culmination of the main character's work in the community, and everything truly does come together in this beautifully supportive environment with teamwork. So I love that. One more detail that I thought was interesting about this tarot spread as a chapter-by-chapter outline. We have two queens and the Empress. That is a lot of strong, nurturing energy. That is a really strong connection to nature as well. I especially love the order in which they were pulled. We have two queens, each as one of them is the second chapter in the book, and the other queen is the second to last chapter in the book. And then the Empress is the exact middle of the book. That balance is gorgeous. I love that just happened, right? That's what the tarot revealed to us. The other interesting note about this tarot reading is that we have 3 8 cards. So we have the 8 of Swords, the 8 of Pentacles, and Strength is also the 8th card of the major arcana. Cards associated with the number 8 are typically about movement, success, confidence, strength, and we really do see a lot of that in this book as a whole. So it's always interesting, when we are doing tarot readings, you want to be looking at the individual cards, but you also want to be looking at how the different cards are interacting with one another, and like the order that they are in and how they connect to one another. So even for a tarot spread like this, where we want to really think about it through the lens of each individual card representing an individual chapter, there is still, of course, always that value in looking at it overall as a whole. What is the full tarot reading telling us when we're looking at the different interactions between the cards? So there you have it. That is how I outlined the chapters for my upcoming rom-com novella, Love by Design, which will be published later this summer. This process was very fun. Doing this whole tarot reading as a chapter-by-chapter outline, I loved it. I absolutely intend to do tarot readings for many more chapter outlines in future books. Coming up with ideas for my stories is one of my favorite things. I love the ideation process. I really, really enjoy exploring all of the different possibilities and directions that a story can take. And what I liked about doing a tarot spread as the chapter-by-chapter outline is that it directs the ideation process. It's an interesting way to start thinking about, okay, if this card comes up in a romance novel, what could some of the connection points be? What are some of the different ways that this card could be interpreted? It's a sort of creative constraint that also expands possibility because it can nudge you in a direction that you hadn't previously considered. I really like that. It is very cool. So in some more upcoming episodes here on the Author Diary Entries podcast, I will share with you about the writing and editing process for this novella. I will let you know the actual details of the plot, and I will keep you posted as we get closer to book release day. So I hope that you will tune in for all of that. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you are enjoying the Author Diary Entries podcast, please take 2 minutes to rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It means so much to me when you do that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.